Let's talk about that with Mims Davies, Conservative MP and Shadow Women's Minister, who joins us right now. A very good morning to you.
Hello, Julia. I'm not sure you should change your mind as often as your socks.
Very good.
But I think it's important sometimes to, front up and say and do the right thing.
Well, indeed. I mean, I think Kemi Badenoch did a magnificent job at PMQs yesterday, and she took your job, didn't she, the day before, in response to Bridget Phillipson's announcement in response to that Supreme Court ruling last week. Took the Prime Minister 6 days before he actually said anything in response. And he still has not said the words that, trans women are not women. He still won't say that, although he has said it before, and he said it in only very recent months. Does he need to apologise, not just to, the likes of Rosie Duffield, a Labour MP, basically forced out of the Labour Party over this issue, but also to, the 51% of the population that he has been miscategorising for the last God knows how many years?
Well, I think he should definitely be fronting up on this, and he can't bring himself to do it. He couldn't do it at PMQs yesterday, and the tone of Bridget Phillipson when she came into the statement that Kemi took, and it's not often as a shadow minister that the leader of the opposition is raring to be at the box, but she has been working on this for some time, and many people agreeing, such as Rosie Duffield, that, why is it difficult to say what a woman is? It frankly shouldn't be. And that's the situation we've got ourselves in. And the Prime Minister, was again talking about men and anything else apart from fronting up to what the Supreme Court had to tell him.
Yeah, he was obsessed with Robert Jenrick, wasn't he? Talking about Robert Jenrick repeatedly. Yeah. He talked about Nigel Farage and not the actual issue. But here's the thing. Women. A lot of people, including me, and I was tackling this on air and also behind the scenes as well, talking to Tory ministers in the last government in power for 14 years. There was confusion. There wasn't any confusion in most people's minds. The pretend confusion over the Equality Act and what a woman was and what it meant in law had been going for a good 10 years of the time that the Tories were in power, and yet there was an absolute failure to tackle that and to clarify the law. I know that Kemi Badenoch did try to do that as Equalities Minister for many years, and really did try to get on top of that, and I applaud her for that. But the Tories were in power for a lot of the time when the trans ideology took over our schools, our hospitals, our public services, many of our private sector as well, took away women's rights, put women's and girls' safety at risk in prisons, refuges and everywhere, toilets, changing rooms. And the Tory government did not act on this. A lot of people will be saying, thank you very much for being on the right side of history in the talk, but you didn't walk the walk enough. Do you think your party owes an apology to the women of this nation?
Well, let me cover that, Julia, because I think you're absolutely right that making sure that people who identify as trans, men or women, are not discriminated, harassed or attacked. That's one thing. But what you've rightly said, over this last 10 years, and this is how it's got to this point, that court cases have had to be held, is because it became clear in protecting a very, very small minority of people, women's rights were being eroded. And that is fundamentally wrong. I've been involved in the Conservative Women's Organisation for not far off 20 years. We are coming up to the centenary of universal suffrage, hard fought, hard won rights. Our safety, our well-being, our safe spaces being eroded for a minority of people who face discrimination every day. And you mentioned the NHS earlier. Again, instead of thinking about 50% of their patients, some people are coming out once again worried about a very small minority of people being discriminated. Nobody wants that. In the court's ruling, that was clear. Yeah. And what we haven't been able to do, and the Prime Minister yesterday wasn't able to stand up for women's rights. It's not a zero-sum game, but Kemi was right when she came into the equalities brief, and I was alongside her when I was doing the equalities role at DWP as a minister there, that Stonewall was dictating potentially how this law was being interpreted. So I very much praise For Women Scotland. I very much praise Rosie Duffield and other people who've come forward.
Yeah, but it shouldn't have been. It should have been up to do the same. No, but it shouldn't have been the job of For Women Scotland and the three women we interviewed, one of the women who was victorious in that Supreme Court ruling. It shouldn't have been up to them to do this. You guys were in government. You were a minister in government. I know, you didn't make the final decisions. We had a number, God knows how many prime ministers over that time. And you'd rather leave it as a culture war and a bit of a battle to have at the general election, rather than actually making sure that, you got men who are pretending to be women out of women's prisons. There are still 2 men in prison in England who claim to be trans women who are in the women's estate. There are still girls today who are at school, primary and secondary school, who are having to use mixed toilets, even though they've got a right to single-sex toilets. There are still, refuges where men are allowed in. There are changing rooms in hospitals and wards in hospitals where there are men who claim to be women who are allowed in. We know that, NHS hospitals basically, plotting to defy this trans ruling, still fully on board with this stuff. We've got nurses going to employment tribunals. Those are still ongoing. They haven't been settled because they're simply saying, I don't want a man standing there pretending he's a woman watching me while I'm getting in my bra and knickers and changing my uniform. This stuff has all happened. It didn't just happen since Labour have been in charge. It's been happening for years, and it's happening today.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that, and I think you're right, and I totally agree that safe, fair and equal is my mantra. And what's been happening, you mentioned the London Marathon. Again, people who want to stand up for women's rights are being accused of not caring about others, and women care about everybody. But what was happening is our rights in different areas were being eroded, and it wasn't about toilets, it was about sex attackers, male sex attackers who identified in a certain way, then their victims having to call them a she. Look, for me, it doesn't matter who you are. Criminality is criminality, however you identify. And we as the Conservative Party need to be prepared to challenge that.
But Mims, you guys didn't do anything about it when you were in power. That's the problem.
But Julia, you're buying into exactly what Keir Starmer was saying to Kemi yesterday, and that is not true. And she gave the list of all of the work that she'd done.
No, she did brilliant. She did brilliant work. Oh, God, she issued guidance after guidance, got Stonewall out of her department, all of that. But at the end of the day, Stonewall's still massively being publicly funded across the country to push this completely misogynistic, illegal now, trans ideology, illegal advice, completely against the law. Police officers under a Tory government, male police officers pretending to be, I'm going to call them pretending to be women, being able to strip search women. I mean, we're talking, this stuff happened. The schools that my taxes pay for, and everyone who's watching now and listening now, our taxes pay for those state schools, forcing girls to go into toilets with boys. That happened when the Tories were still running the education department. You guys could have stopped it all. Why didn't you?
Well, we issued the gender questioning guidance for schools, rightly so.
Well, are you in charge of schools or not when you're the government? If you could decide what kids learn in the curriculum, can you not decide whether they get to go to the toilet in privacy or not?
Well, and straight away, this new government scrapped that, and we don't know what they think now. And Bridget Phillipson couldn't confirm that in the chamber the other day. So we need clarity. We need common sense. You're the home of common sense. And frankly, so should our party be. And I think what we have seen is an erosion of women's rights. And I think, therefore, then people felt frightened to challenge that for the feeling that they would be excluding minorities. But ultimately, 50% of the population shouldn't be fighting to be heard. And I did much of this in the general election, fronting out on the media on this to talk about women's rights. So I think we've now got a point where we know exactly where we are, that women have felt for decades that we've had to keep fighting for our rights. And it's nuts at this point that we've had to do exactly the same thing. So we need the government now to front up and give people the guidance and for us to move forward. It's one thing saying you accept the ruling. The difference here now is, what does it mean for people's day-to-day lives? And can women stop having to fight for their safe spaces and for their well-being?
The campaigners that I've spoken to, and I've been in the forefront of this for many years as well, the campaigners are saying that they are, although very, very positive about the Supreme Court ruling, they also believe that things aren't going to change unless you have the threat of court cases. And again, lawyers lawyers should be queuing up, no win, no fee, guaranteed win on every single one of these cases where women's single-sex spaces are not being protected, whether it's in schools or hospitals or freedom of speech, these employment tribunals that are still going on in the private and the public sector on a grand scale. This is thousands of people are being affected by this. But it's taking individuals to stand up, whereas it should have been the Tory government, it should be the Labour government now, and having their feet held to the fire. But doesn't the number one thing need to be, we need Stonewall not getting a single penny of public money? It must be a crime for any local council, any school, any hospital, anybody at all to give any trans ideology group pushing the agenda that Stonewall has a single penny of public money.
So when I was a minister, looking where public money was going, I was always relentless in who got it and what was their guiding principles. And I think what you heard from Kemi rightly is that she and we will be relentless in holding this government to account, making sure that we do the right thing on behalf of women, making sure that those trans people, those people who are identified differently, that very small minority are protected and not harassed or discriminated against, but equally that women's rights cannot and should not be eroded to make everyone else feel better. And I think that is the situation we got ourselves into. Let's be honest. So the mantra for our party is safe, fair and equal, and that women are at the heart of this, and we shouldn't have to be pushing for what we should be expecting. I agree with the safety in schools as well. You want privacy as a young girl, very much so, and it's really important that new guidance comes from the government and quickly, and yet Keir should be saying sorry and remembering what a woman is.
Yeah, I don't think he knows what a woman is. I still don't think he does. Mims Davies, thank you so much for joining us, Conservative MP, Shadow Women's Minister.